Miguel had worked as a janitor in a big technology company for almost 6 years. Every day he came early, wearing his faded blue uniform and quiet smile. He cleaned the floors, emptied trash cans, and made sure the offices were shining before anyone arrived. He was always calm and polite, never caused trouble, and always greeted people with respect. But to most of the office staff, he was invisible. They only saw the mop in his hand, not the man behind it. The only person who spoke kindly to him was Emily, the receptionist. She noticed how Miguel always said, "Good morning," and helped anyone who dropped papers or spilled coffee. Sometimes she brought him a cup of tea. "You work too hard," she'd say. Miguel would smile and reply, "Work is good for the soul, Miss Emily." She liked his gentle nature, but never guessed there was something unusual about him. One Monday morning, the company was buzzing. The CEO, Richard Calloway, was walking around with a group of foreign investors. They came from Japan, Germany, and France. The company wanted their support for a new project. Everyone was nervous, making sure everything looked perfect. Miguel quietly stayed out of the way, cleaning near the hallway where the meeting was about to start. The meeting began, and the CEO proudly spoke about the company's success. But there was a small problem. The investors didn't understand everything. Their English was limited, and Richard didn't know their languages. The interpreter hired for the event was late, and the room felt tense. Still, Richard tried to keep smiling and continued explaining things slowly. While this was happening, Miguel was quietly mopping a corner of the room. He wasn't supposed to be there, but the floor had to be cleaned. One of the Japanese guests, an older gentleman, looked at him and said politely, "Good morning," in Japanese. Miguel paused, looked up, and answered perfectly in Japanese with a warm smile. Everyone in the room stopped talking for a moment. The sound of his words was clear and natural, not something memorized from a phrasebook. The Japanese investor's eyes widened. He replied in Japanese, testing Miguel. To everyone's surprise, Miguel answered fluently, as if he had lived in Japan for years. The CEO looked at him, confused but amused. "Well, that's unexpected," Richard said, laughing lightly. "You know Japanese, Mr. Janitor." Miguel smiled humbly. "Yes, sir. Just a little." Richard thought it was just luck. "Okay, maybe you learned a few phrases from a movie," he joked. "Let's see if you can handle this." He turned to one of the German guests. "Ask him something in your language," he said. The German investor smiled and asked a long question in German, expecting Miguel to freeze. But Miguel didn't hesitate. He translated the question into English for the CEO and then answered politely in German. His words were perfect. The Germans laughed with delight and clapped their hands. The CEO blinked, unsure what he was seeing. "You speak German too?" he asked in disbelief. Miguel nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. And French, a little." The French investor, curious now, joined in and asked him something. Miguel's answer came back in flawless French, spoken softly but confidently. The sound filled the room like music that people were speechless. Even Emily, standing near the door, couldn't believe it. "Miguel?" she whispered. "Since when?" The CEO was both amazed and embarrassed. He had walked past Miguel hundreds of times without really seeing him. Now the janitor was talking with ease to people who had traveled halfway across the world. Richard laughed nervously. "Okay, I give up. You clearly know what you're doing." After the investors left, Richard asked Miguel to come to his office. Miguel was nervous. He thought he might be in trouble for interrupting. When he stepped inside, Richard was waiting with a curious look. "Sit down, Miguel," he said. "You surprised a lot of people today. How many languages do you actually know?" Miguel smiled modestly. "9, sir. Maybe more if you count the dialects." The CEO leaned forward, stunned. 9? That's incredible. How does a janitor know 9 languages? Miguel looked down at his hands. His voice was calm but filled with memories. I wasn't always a janitor. Back in my home country, I was a language professor. I taught at a university for many years. But when the university closed and I lost everything, I had to find a way to survive. My wife was sick, and I needed to send money to my daughter. So, when I came here, this was the only job I could get. Richard was quiet. He didn't know what to say. The idea that a man with such talent was cleaning floors every day made him uncomfortable. Why didn't you tell anyone? He asked softly. Miguel shrugged. Because people don't listen when they see a janitor. It's easier to stay quiet and do my work. I'm thankful I have a job at all. The CEO felt a deep sense of guilt. He realized how many times he had walked past Miguel without noticing his intelligence or kindness. For years, a brilliant man had been hidden behind a mop and a uniform. You're right, Richard said finally. Sometimes we only see what we want to see. They talked for almost an hour. Miguel shared stories about teaching in different countries, helping students learn languages, and his love for communication. His eyes sparkled as he spoke about his daughter, Sophia, who was studying linguistics abroad. When Miguel left the office that day, the CEO couldn't stop thinking about him. He stayed late, staring out the window, remembering Miguel's calm, wise expression. There was something powerful about a man who had lost everything, yet still carried himself with dignity and hope. The next morning, when Miguel arrived for his shift, Emily stopped him at the door. The CEO wants to see you again, she said, smiling mysteriously. Miguel wiped his hands nervously on his uniform and walked to Richard's office. When he entered, he saw a clean desk, a steaming cup of coffee, and something lying in front of the CEO, a new ID badge. Richard stood up and handed it to him. From today, he said, you're not just cleaning the building. You're helping us speak to the world. We need someone who understands people, not just words. Miguel looked down at the badge. It read, Lead Translator, Global Relations Department. His hands trembled slightly. He looked up with watery eyes. Sir, are you sure? Richard smiled. Absolutely. You've earned this. And I think we owe you an apology for not seeing your true value sooner. Emily clapped her hands with joy. The whole office was buzzing again, but this time for a different reason. The janitor who once mopped the floors was now going to represent the company to the world. Miguel thanked the CEO and promised to do his best. When he walked back to his small locker room, he sat for a moment, holding the badge close to his heart. He whispered softly, So, fathers, dream isn't lost after all. He smiled for the first time that day, a proud, quiet smile. And though the world outside had not changed, for Miguel, everything had. He was no longer invisible. He was finally seen. The next morning, Miguel came to work early like always. But this time, he didn't wear his old cleaning uniform. Instead, he wore a new shirt and tie that Emily had helped him pick out. His heart was beating fast as he stood in front of the big glass doors of the company building. For years, he had entered through the back door meant for janitors. But today, the security guard smiled and said, Good morning, Mr. Miguel. For the first time, people looked at him differently. Inside the lobby, everyone was whispering about him. Some were happy for him, some were surprised, and a few didn't understand how a janitor could become a translator overnight. Emily was waiting by the elevator, holding a small box. Here, she said with a grin. Something to start your new chapter. Inside was a fine pen and a small notebook with the words, Never Stop Believing, printed on the cover. Miguel thanked her with a warm smile. When he entered his new office, he was amazed. It wasn't large, but it had a desk, a computer, and a window that looked over the city. There was a nameplate on the desk that read, Miguel Santos, lead translator. He sat down slowly, touching the smooth surface of the table. It felt unreal. Only yesterday, he had been cleaning the same floors he was now walking on as a company executive. A few minutes later, CEO Richard entered. "Ready for your first task?" he asked. Miguel stood quickly and nodded. "Yes, sir. We're having a conference with our partners from Brazil," Richard explained. "Our regular translator can't make it. I want you to handle it." Miguel smiled softly. "Portuguese," he said. "It's one of my favorites." When the meeting started, some of the employees seemed doubtful. But as soon as the Brazilian delegate began speaking, Miguel listened carefully and translated each word smoothly into English. His tone matched the speaker's, exactly calm when the topic was serious, light when there was humor. He didn't just translate words. He translated emotions. The CEO watched, deeply impressed. The guests were so comfortable that the meeting lasted twice as long as planned. At the end, one of the Brazilians said, "We've never felt this connected before." After the meeting, Richard shook Miguel's hand in front of everyone. "That was incredible," he said. "You've just saved us a deal that could have fallen apart." Miguel only smiled humbly. "I just love languages, sir. They're bridges between hearts." Word spread quickly through the building. The man who once cleaned the floors was now saving million-dollar deals. Employees began greeting him with respect. Some asked how he learned so many languages. He told them, "When you love to learn, the world becomes your teacher." He started helping co-workers write emails to clients abroad, and even offered to teach basic language lessons after work. Soon, small groups gathered around his office every evening, laughing as they practiced phrases in French, German, and Japanese. A few months later, the company planned a large international conference in Tokyo. It was a major event, and Richard wanted Miguel to come along. "We need you there," he said. "You've become the company's voice." Miguel hesitated. "Sir, I've never even flown before." The CEO laughed. "Then it's time you do." When the plane took off, Miguel looked out of the window, watching the clouds drift by. He thought of his daughter, Sophia. She was studying in another country, working hard just like him. He couldn't wait to tell her about everything that had happened. In Tokyo, the conference was filled with business leaders from around the world. The room was large and bright, filled with banners, cameras, and people speaking different languages at once. It could have been confusing for anyone else, but for Miguel, it was like music. He listened, smiled, and moved from one group to another, speaking Japanese, French, Spanish, and even a little Arabic when he met a delegate from the Middle East. By the end of the conference, several companies wanted to work with Richard's firm simply because of Miguel's kindness and skill. "He makes communication easy," one of them said. "He makes people feel respected." That night, after all the meetings, Richard and Miguel sat in a small restaurant overlooking the city lights. "You know, Miguel," Richard said slowly, "I used to think success was about money and titles. But you've taught me something different." Miguel looked at him curiously. "What's that, sir?" Richard smiled. "Success is about seeing people for who they truly are. You've reminded me that greatness doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears a janitor's uniform." Miguel felt his eyes sting. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "I just wanted to do my job well." When he returned home after the trip, Miguel called his daughter. She answered with a bright smile. "Papa, I saw the news. You were on the company website," she said excitedly. "Everyone is talking about you." Miguel laughed softly. "I guess people finally realized your father knows a few words." "No, Papa," she said proudly. "They realized my father never gave up." Tears filled his eyes. "You're my reason to keep going, Sophia. Always remember that." Weeks passed, and Miguel continued to shine in his new role. He helped train new translators, worked closely with international clients, and even started a small charity program inside the company to teach languages to immigrant workers who struggled with English. Richard fully supported him. "You're making this company better from the inside out," he said one day. Miguel always stayed humble. He never forgot where he came from. Sometimes, when he passed the janitor's closet, he would peek inside and see the old mop and bucket. He would smile softly, remembering the days when his only job was to clean floors. Now he cleaned misunderstandings between people instead. One afternoon, the company held a big event to celebrate its 10th anniversary. The entire staff gathered in the main hall. Richard stood on stage to give his speech. After talking about the company's growth, he paused and said, "There's someone here who reminds us what hard work and humility look like. Someone who proves that talent can be found anywhere if we choose to see it." Then he called Miguel to the stage. The crowd clapped loudly as Miguel walked up, looking shy but smiling. Richard placed his hand on Miguel's shoulder. "When I first met him, he was cleaning this building. Today, he helps us reach people across the world. Miguel, thank you for showing us the power of respect and learning." Miguel looked out at the cheering crowd. He felt nervous, but spoke from his heart. "I am honored," he said softly. "I didn't come here to be important. I came here to work. But this company gave me a chance to do what I love again, to connect people. Never look down on anyone because of their job. Sometimes, the person sweeping your floor might be the one who helps you reach the stars." The room went silent for a moment. Then everyone stood and applauded. Emily wiped her tears. Even the security guard at the back of the hall was clapping proudly. Later that evening, Miguel went home, tired but happy. He sat by the window, looking at the city lights and thinking about the strange, beautiful path life had taken him on. He had lost everything once, but through patience and faith, he had rebuilt his world. He opened the small notebook Emily had given him months ago. On the first page, he wrote in neat handwriting, "No one is too small to make a difference. Every person carries a story worth hearing." Miguel closed the notebook, smiled, and whispered, "Tomorrow will be another good day." Then he turned off the light, knowing he had not only changed his own life, but had taught everyone around him a lesson they would never forget. That kindness, knowledge, and humility speak the same language everywhere in the world.